Right, so we thought we'd try something a little bit different in this session, being more of a conversation rather than a presentation along the way. We'll allow time at the end whereby you can then pose questions to our two panel guests. So at the end is the Honourable, if you've been in Australia, we call the Honourable Imad Abdul Baki, who's the Senior Security Officer at UNHCR, based here in Geneva. So we thank you for joining us. We've known Imad for a number of years now and had numerous conversations with regard to civilian armoured vehicles and particularly issues of specifications, capability reviews and fleet management issues, which we're talking about. Excuse me, I'm just going to do this. And also Yoni Lapidot, who's one of the principal consultants with our firm, Armoured Consulting. And what we want to do is just, we're going to pose some questions to the two gentlemen in relation specifically to fleet management issues. And again, and I mean no disrespect to procurement agencies, but, and maybe because I've done it often enough, but specifying and buying a vehicle is, I don't think that's the hardest part of the life cycle. I think maintaining vehicles in the field, particularly in very remote locations, that's where the challenges are. That's where the additional costs are. And when you look at the life cycle costs of a vehicle over, say, 10 years, the procurement cost is not the significant, more than 50% of the budget that's required. So we want to sort of delve into a couple of key issues and hear from people who've been out in the field to then get their impressions along the way. So, as I said, specifications, procurement and production are really the start of the life cycle of a civilian armoured vehicle. The real challenge, as I said, begins in the field, keeping the fleets operational, safe and cost effective over many, many years, and generally in very complex environments. So let's explore a couple of interrelated themes from fleet management systems to maintenance, service support, command and communication, and that particularly links headquarters to the field teams, particularly in the remote areas. So, Imad, if we can start with you, from your perspective in the field, what do you think are some of the essential ingredients that makes a fleet management system work in real operational conditions? Issues such as maybe leadership, training, data, communication, and what are some of the biggest lessons that have been learned by UNHCR's own fleets as they've evolved over the years?
Thank you, Rob. And I take it an opportunity to thank you again and Yoni and all those behind the scenes and preparing and conducting these CAV forums. I got the pleasure to join you at the first one 4 years ago or 3 years ago, and this is the fourth I attend. If you allow me, but just before answering that question, like you introduced me, I would like to share with the colleagues and friends in this room how my connection to the civilian armored vehicles started. So I joined the UN in 2008 after being graduated as a civil engineer. Then I did the military engineering in my home country in Lebanon when I joined the military academy, and I studied explosive, ballistic and blast threats and all of that. But the point that I would like to share with you, in 2011 I was in Libya with one other colleague from UNMAS, the United Nations Mine Action Service, and my first connection is attending AV driver training. And then the following week I jumped in one of the AVs, and my colleague in the second. We were only two, and we had two AVs, and we drove in 2 days and a half, 2,300 kilometers, going from Tripoli in the north of Libya down to Sabha, and then to the east or center of Libya, Hoon, up to Sirte and back to Tripoli. So we did a loop of 2,300 kilometers. So I was not a driver, but I had to take that driver's training and then drive myself that vehicle. Of course, in 3 days, driving a 5 tons vehicle was totally different from what I drove 2 weeks earlier. So I wanted to share this point with you because later, joining the management in mine action as well, programs in Libya, then later in Iraq, I assisted in some parts of the program in managing the fleet. And then later, I started working with the UNHCR 4 years ago as a blast expert and structural engineer and covering that aspects of AVs. So sorry, it was a bit long, but I want to share with you how it started, like by the driving an AV, then getting involved in managing the fleet, and then now overseeing the technical specifications and assisting the procurement service in managing the fleet in UNHCR. So again, sorry for a long introduction, but I wanted to share with you this point. So back to the question, I believe like this morning, you, Rob, like put it in very clear and the structured manner how like, those factors and ingredients really lead to a successful fleet management system. So of course I would indeed like confirm again that the leadership and the buy-in from the management is essential like in anything. So ensuring or like putting clear set of expectations, enforcing like guidance and standards and policy. Supporting accountability. All this will lead to a fleet management that is kind of discipline. It's not like improvisation. So they don't improvise. They just follow clear guidance from the management. So leadership is very important. The training is essential in all aspects. And of course in AVs, when it comes to AVs, whether the drivers, whether the staff or the personnel being passengers inside those vehicles need to understand and have some awareness how to deal with it. Not like I will try like not to stay away a little bit from theoretical things and share with you some practical experience. Like even staff when they put some luggage in the cargo department in the back or cargo space in the back of the vehicle, putting it in the wrong way will cause scratches, for example, on the polycarbonate part of the glass. So even staff who are not involved neither in driving or managing the fleet need to be aware of like some aspects. Of course, then again, like the training should include, in my views, like explaining why, not only how to do it, but they should understand the rationale behind that, why we do this, why we report small incident or small error, like or small damage, because it doesn't become later like a worst, and it becomes like, if we address it now, it's cost efficient and all of it. So this is about the training, and of course, like data, when we talk about data, capturing every single point about AVs, like starting from the mileage, the fuel consumption, the maintenance, the inspections that conducted, the minor like damage that was observed by the driver or the users or the fleet colleagues. All these data, if it should be captured properly to help planning for the future, like to do preventive plans instead of having like waiting something to happen and then we react. So preventive instead of reactive. You mentioned communications, of course, again, it's very important. Like we have the data, if we don't communicate it on time, not only communicate it. If we report something late, it doesn't make a difference of not reporting it, maybe slight difference, but it's still late response if we don't report it on time. Communications both ways, like explaining to the users how to, or like communicating information about the asset, or the users reporting back to the fleet managers and how to respond, how to prevent. I would like to add one last point also, like the fleet management system, like doing all this, we have buy-in from leadership, we have like the training and we improve the skills and all of that, communication system in place, data are there. The fleet management are not successful unless they do also the maintenance and having the vehicles are mechanically readiness, having ready for use. Otherwise, like we do all the theoretical parts and then we don't do things actually. So like having vehicles ready for use to conduct operations is very essential. So again, like those ingredients are, as you call them, or factors, are very essential for the successful fleet management.
You talk about data collection, and I remember we did some work with the OSCE a number of years ago, and their service centre was out in the east, now sort of the middle of the conflict zone. And the challenge they had was just getting people in the field to report the data, whether it was maintenance records, etc. Seems the fuel consumption is the main issue, and that people generally do it. But you know, have you had challenges in getting people in the field to report the data, and are there any incentives or systems that assisted in getting that data timely and accurately to you?
Of course, like always is challenging, like sitting here in Geneva and an HQ location with the perfect connections and all of that, like internet connection and assets that we have in our hands is totally different from being in the field or like even deeper field where they have problems with connectivities. Even if we provide a simple form to fill and submit, sometimes they face challenges and it takes hours for them. So always there are challenges like in recording those data, but we always like go back to the same point that I mentioned earlier, why. So if they really absorb and understand that reporting this data will lead to like less problems, like prevent like mechanical failure on the road and during the mission, safer missions, protecting their lives as drivers and the passengers inside the cars. Of course, like the data is, as I always have these discussions with colleagues whenever we like create a new tool or platform for collecting data, regardless what data we're talking about. It is good as much as the data is fed in the system or the tool. Otherwise, like it's not reliable, it's not like useful for future preventions.
Certainly data collection is a great challenge. And so, Yoni, from your experience being out in the field too, there's a difference between the theory of a fleet management system, excuse me, that theory, and then the practical reality out in the field. So can you share any thoughts as to sort of what separates that checklist approach, you know, the theory approach of a fleet management system, and then the living reality out in the field?
I think what Imad said about leadership, and at the end it starts and ends at the human factor. And you go to country offices where I'm traveling most of the time, less than in the headquarters, and you see the country office manager got the checklist, got everything, but he will never follow that because it was sent to him by the headquarter. And he doesn't, first of all, he doesn't know usually in person the people at the headquarter. And second, he will do the opposite because it was sent to him by the headquarter. And he knows that, he thinks that he knows better than them. They are only 2 years in this position. I'm here for 20 years already. I know better than them. And they can say whatever they want. I know better. I think that the way to, and you know, I mean, sometimes they have a very, I wouldn't say systematic way to how to manage their 20 AVs or even 2 AVs in there if it's a small fleet. But in many times they will do the opposite on purpose only because it came from someone that they don't know and they think that he sits in Geneva, Brussels, Washington, D.C., wherever. And he's in the remoted area dealing with all of the real-life challenges. I think that the way to overcome that, again, I know it comes to budget and time, it's a time-consuming and everything, but if the manufacturer gives a small, takes even a small part of educating even the tiniest, smallest country office, the people at the end, the person at the country office will take it more seriously. And I give an example just to make it more clear. If a country office manager who has 5 armored vehicles has a list of spare parts that he's allowed to use and nothing but these, but this list was been sent to him by the headquarter, he probably finds something else and say that I found something better, although he cannot do that. If the manufacturer will tell him, look, give him a call or a video call or meet him somewhere and tell, look, these are the spare parts that you should follow because these are the parts that the vehicle was certified with. From that moment, I think he will take it much more seriously and he will not put anything else because it's not the headquarter who told him that, it's the manufacturer.
So look, that's interesting, and it comes to then the relationship between headquarters and the manufacturers who are, it should be in our view, the design authority and deciding on the parts that are going to be used or repairs, etc., to the vehicle. And so you also raised an interesting issue, that of the communication, the relationship between headquarters and the field. Can I get you maybe to comment, turn it the other way around. Let's imagine you're sitting in headquarters in, even Canberra for going out loud, or Brussels or Washington or London, wherever the case may be. So if you were sitting there with what you know from the field, are there any thoughts you could share as to what headquarters can do to avoid being seen as the big brother, and the people in headquarters, things that they might be able to do to help convince the people, work with the people in the field to proceed with that structured fleet management system that they're trying to implement?
Again, I know Imad has been traveling almost every week to another place. But we know other places that the the global fleet manager of an organization, I don't know, pay a visit maybe to the main 2 or 3 locations with the biggest fleets, and he never been to or doesn't have time, and that I have no complaints on that, but to pay a visit to the other 100 locations with 2, 3, 5 armored vehicles. So people at these country offices never even met the people that they should report to. So why bother? I mean, that, again, I'm basing it on conversation with the country offices managers that they're there for 20 years. The only person that they see is the head of the office and not the headquarter.
Yeah, look, I think that's a good point in that in many cases, and part of it's that rotation of people in the head office. And every couple of years they get posted out to another posting, another area, whether it's within civilian armoured vehicles or they might be posted as in an embassy, if you like. And so the next person comes in, and then it takes time for them to understand the product, understand the program. And then you say, well, now go out in the field and talk to people. And I think there's a bit of buy-in from leadership that says, we haven't got money for that. You're here to run the fleet, and you're sitting in wherever land, but no, I'm not going to pay you to go to Pretoria and talk to the people about the unique situations about dealing in South Africa, etc. So I think there's something to be said there. Look, just let's move along a little bit and focus a bit more on the repairs and maintenance and sort of a systematic approach for that. And so, Imad, what have you seen maybe as the main challenges through the UNHCR in establishing regular and systematic maintenance routines? Are there any regional examples that you've seen where it's been maybe easier or more difficult to work with the local fleet managers, the local workshops in implementing a structured and scheduled maintenance routine?
Yes, this is another very challenging topic to talk about. Challenging life. Yeah, I was listening with interest with what you have said about the communication and the level of communication between HQ and the field, and I cannot disagree. And then many of those we try always to address and getting closer. As you mentioned, that I do travel a lot to the field. And I do take the opportunity every time to talk with our drivers, like AV drivers, with the fleet colleagues. I go back to the same point that I repeated probably twice, and let them understand why. So what will be the positive consequences of respecting those policies and guidance that we put in place? In some occasions, like some fleet colleagues, they consider their work as administrative, purely administrative, while it has very deep technical aspect and practical aspects that they need to take care of. Of course, let's get to the second topic that you mentioned about the challenges. The one of the main challenges is always the competition between the operational pressure. We need to conduct these missions, and postponing the planned regular maintenance or inspection. It's a dilemma that we cannot we couldn't sort it 100%, because we know that we operate in locations that those missions that we conduct in majority of cases are saving lives. So this is from one side. On the other side, as you mentioned this morning, we say safety and security of personnel is priority, then we ignore some minor aspects in the vehicle and we send them to the field. So this dilemma is to be honest, is difficult to sort it out 100%. We always have to find a way to find solutions. And I will share some practical terms, in many countries, and I believe this would be applicable to many users of AVs. Let's say a minimum of 2 AVs should be moving together in a convoy going to a specific location. We try to partner with other UN agencies. If they are going to the same place in the same day, we could send one vehicle and to join a convoy, and then the second vehicle would go to inspection, for example, or to maintenance. It's not possible all the time, and we know the implications, because the time will not be 100% for our team, because they are joining another team and they have to be together all the time, so they have less time at the location where they are going. Those type of practical solutions help to continue implementing the planned inspection or maintenance, regular maintenance times. And then sometimes, like as I said, like they tend to keep driving. Okay, it's like a minor mechanical problem. It will not fail during this mission, so let's postpone until we have a failure. And then they realize that the vehicle cannot move anymore. Then so like we try to find a way in the middle, like to conduct maintenance without disrupting the operations. And as you mentioned at the beginning, I work in the security service of UNHCR, covering the AVs as security, high value security asset. So there is this tendency from colleagues who implementing programs that security try to block like the work. How they bluntly see it at the beginning, but like of course they understand that saving their lives is equally important as saving the life of those you are serving. So again, like there are a lot of challenges that we try to address. There are like specific cases that is applicable in a country, is not in other country. Sometimes like lack of workshops that having the minimum infrastructure to conduct those maintenance is a reason behind not doing it. So like the operation has to wait, or that office in the deep field, as we call it, like is like it has to wait maybe a few months until we get a technician to travel in and go and do the required inspection. So
it's interesting you say that, because I think that's one of the opportunities, and we saw this. I think when Yoni, you might talk about when you went to northern Kenya, we were doing some inspections, and there are a number of UN agencies in the same area, and the ability to share resources and communicate around between the different groups. And I think there might have been actually a UNHCR workshop in the north of Cameroon, and they were servicing the other UN agencies there too. And so, you know, is that something that you see that the UN's doing? I won't say well, because I don't think they're doing it well, but you know, is that something that they can use to leverage in order to improve that coordination amongst the different units of the UN on missions and in workshops in those remote areas?
Yes, actually, in many locations, we manage as the UN like to create or like establish a service that is available for everyone and is reasonable and like meeting the minimum requirements that we would need to address mechanical or like any failures in the AVs. In some other locations is less successful, let me say, like because yes, we are one UN, we have one UN system, but every agency has their own mandate. They have their own operations. And sometimes, as I said, like the main challenge sometimes is the operational pressure versus like the regular maintenance and all of that. Sometimes the coordination is perfect as a principle, but applying it in the field sometimes face challenges that are not related to the AVs, for example, or like is a matter of like mandate sometimes. Sometimes we lack, for example, like one standard for a specific topic, then it doesn't work for everyone. We are like maybe less flexible in one topic, they are not so. But at the end, like we have the security measures that is applicable for everyone. So again, the details of challenges in the field sometimes force you like to whether like to go independently to a solution or like jointly go for a solution that is good for everyone.
I think that's one of the great challenges of the UN, and I think it's also the great opportunity, trying to get the various agencies to talk together and come up with common principles and common practices. I think it'll be a while before that happens, but it's certainly something to aim for. In fact, so Yoni, for you, I think that's, you know, flowing on from that is from your experiences too, and seeing different fleets in different missions, sometimes within the same geographical area or not. And so are there any, what is the most challenging issues that you've seen by these organisations in trying to manage their fleets in these remote areas particularly?
Bring spare parts and find a decent workshop that is qualified, well-trained, even if it's not well-equipped, but it's at least well-trained by the manufacturers to deal with a build of these manufacturers. I'll give one example. You mentioned Kenya, so we went. It was the most wonderful, well-established Toyota dealership in Nairobi. I mean, it was in Nairobi, but it's like the hub of all of East Africa. It was the most beautiful workshop I've ever seen. And I asked them about how they take care of the one of the UN agencies' vehicles there. And they said that they were trained by another manufacturer. They mentioned the name of the other manufacturer on his vehicle that being deployed for another customer. And I said, yes, but these are not the same bonding material. I mean, when you replace a glass, it's not the same bonding materials. These are not the same. So you cannot really replicate and copy from one instruction to another. And he said, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't think about it. And I said, it's not only a matter of warranty, but you can put something that not necessarily
Stick.
it will, but you want to follow the instructions, because that's the challenging part. I mean, every manufacturer has its own instructions, has its own material. Some of them use the same, and you don't want to copy paste from one manufacturer to the other. And that was #1 workshop I've ever seen in my life. That's in Nairobi. Think about what's going on sometimes when you go to a really remote that it doesn't even have to pull out a windscreen, he calls 6 of his cousins, and they're doing it by hand, not even with a vacuum device, which is fine. I mean, no one can force them to build this, but at least you want things to be done properly, because the end users here are spending, I don't know how much, thousands of dollars, of euros on a brand new vehicle that should first drive them safely, second protect them, and they need it for more than 1 week. They need it for a few years. And sometimes you see a vehicle that it's brand new, and after first time in the workshop, it's not fit for purpose anymore because of lack of knowledge.
Yeah, no, I think, look, that's actually a very interesting point, and it raises the concept that from a fleet management side, there is an active involvement between the upper armourer, the procurement office, and the through-life support part of that office, and the user in the field. And it's not just headquarters sitting wherever, dictating terms, conditions, and I'll supply the parts and away you go, and here's the manual. That's great, but the manufacturer actually has a role to play, and particularly more complex when you've got a fleet that's got vehicles from multiple up armourers. And so you had in this situation where the process to install a new windscreen into one vehicle, the workshop said, well, if I've done it in this way for one vehicle, I'll do it for all the vehicles. Well, not necessarily so. And so there's the challenge of this cooperation and coordination between them. And with respect to the up armourers, sometimes their responsiveness post-sales on the through life support is not as good as it could be. And I say that with respect, and I'm sure there's other people who've been with the military before, and when I was in Defence Department, I'd build a capability with the manufacturer. It wasn't civilian armoured vehicles, it was different other vehicles. That was the easy part. Getting the technical documentation, it was like pulling teeth. And you said, it's not that hard. You've got the material, you've created it. Just publish it. And I would have an agent as a Ramie officer from the Australian Army. They were rattling my head like a teapot, saying, come on, get the documents out of the manufacturer. I think we can actually do a little bit better along the way. All right, so look, going on then further about spare parts, Imad, the issue of managing that supply chain of spare parts, disruptions as we saw with COVID, for example, or there might have been disruptions because of the raw materials coming into the manufacturers of the spare parts, or the logistics to actually move them from Europe or South America or Australia or whatever into some remote area of Africa. So are there any stories or any tips that you've seen about how to improve that supply chain management so that parts are available when they're needed in the field?
Yes, actually, we recently started creating or planning to have a stock of spare parts that is ready to be shipped to the field. But let me divide it on different layers where we face challenges with the spare parts procurement. It starts, of course, with the delay of reporting and inspecting and all of that. So this is already a delay. So we address that separately. And then when it comes to the operations, requesting a list of spare parts, what we do usually, we request it from the original supplier or the armoring company or the manufacturer of the AV. Especially if we are talking about those specially engineered for the AVs. So I'm not talking about OEM. Because OEM parts, if they are available with the official dealer, or our fleet is Toyota, if they are available in the country, then we go directly and procure that if possible. Then we go to the spare parts special for the AVs. The challenges we face, it starts from the beginning. The country of origin, for example, might have restrictions sending to a specific country where we have operations. So originally, and since many years, UNHCR, we have our kind of a hub that is intermediate location. So we have to ship the spare parts to that location. It becomes the property of UNHCR, then we can ship it easily to any country we need, because we have exemptions sometimes from those restrictions and all of that. However, on the other side, the country that we are bringing in some spare parts, they might have restrictions on the import. And then we have to apply for import license and all of that. And you cannot do that unless you have the details about the spare parts, including serial numbers and all of it, which you don't know until you get it, or at least to be ready to be shipped from the supplier to our hub. So all these type of challenges, you mentioned COVID, of course, this was applicable for everyone, but when we go to the practical terms, we face things that we cannot oversee. Sometimes we cannot predict. You get surprised. Every location has its own specific challenges. Example, not related only about spare parts shipment. It took us a year and a half for one of the countries to get the spare parts to the country. 1 year and a half. 2 weeks after that, a military group took over a city, and then all the warehouses were looted. So we went back to zero. So every specific location has its own challenges. But back to the main point, yes, back to the main.
Before you started.
Back to the main point, we are trying to address, to reduce the time that we would take, to get spare parts. Of course, different models, different suppliers would also be presenting a challenge, but at least we have a stock that is ready from spare parts, especially those that do not have a very short warranty period, that we can stock for some time, and then we can ship immediately as the request comes from the operations and they get the import license. Of course, the challenges are bigger when it comes, if we could talk about the glass. It has, for example, 2 years warranty. If you put it in the stock for 2 years, then you already wasted the warranty period, and so it depends also on this type of spare parts that we could stock for longer terms to reduce the overall lead time to get it to the field.
Indeed. And look, it's a shame. I think not necessarily your group, one of the other UN agencies, the chaps from Yemen who have been here the last few years, and just the last moment they had to cancel, and we've been speaking to them over the last months. And the challenge being is that they can't get spare parts into the country. Well, okay, now what are you going to do? You can sit there and jump up and down and say, well, I can't repair the vehicle. Well, the fleet manager is responsible. The country manager is saying, your problem, fix the problem. Just make it work. And it becomes very challenging in some of those areas. And so that actually then goes on to the workshops. And, again, we keep talking about challenges and trying to find solutions. Where you've got workshops, as Yoni described, it might be in Nairobi, and it's a beautiful, lovely workshop, as good as you'll get. You go up north, and it's a tin shed and a power outlet. And they, for all the reasons, have been nominated as the workshop to look after civilian armoured vehicles for a very significant UN agency. And I remember, I'll get Yoni to tell a bit of a story about that one. It was a case of, we don't have much choice. That's all we've got. So from your side on the UNHCR, that's a great challenge out there. Have you been able to work through sort of systematically trying to improve the resources, the training and the capabilities of workshops, and authorising certain ones to be available to? And then Yoni, maybe you can tell us some of your experiences, certainly as, for example, in Kenya or wherever.
Over years, UNHCR tried to address those issues Like, for example, when it comes to the inspection, like we have like in our policy, like bi-yearly inspection for our AVs. So like to make sure that everything is on the right track. So we trained colleagues who are capable now to do this inspection. But when it comes to the maintenance or repair itself, we have to use a workshop, we have to use certified technicians. So our first options in case of total absence of any local capacity is like to go and seek the support from the supplier, the AV armoring company or like a manufacturer who would send their technicians to the field and they repair the AVs. And of course, they still need to have a place to work with at. So it would be a local workshop that has the minimum requirements. Sometimes they fly in with their equipment to address or like to repair the vehicles. Of course, there are limitations here what we can do, because like if we are talking about a repair work that would compromise the integrity of the AV, we cannot like accept like go below the requirements. We're not talking here about like changing the oil or filters that can be done with certain level, real like acceptable like level of technical expertise. So again, like we go and seek support from the armory company. Sometimes it's also very challenging in certain security contexts that they cannot send someone and fly in and go there. What we have like in place is like sometimes we have to move the vehicle back from a location to the capital city in that country where the technician can fly in. Again, like we talk a lot about challenges, but like in every case we have a different like approach how to sort it out. You mentioned like with the UN and all of it, like it would be perfect, for example, if we can as UN agencies in one location to create or establish a workshop. But unfortunately, let me say, like in our like procurement regulations, we cannot like get a local workshop like we certified by the supplier on our own like responsibility. So it should be between the two commercial entities. We have to stay out of it. Of course, we can recommend, we can highlight, we can advise the workshop if they would like to serve and have a contract with the UN to get or seek a certification from the supplier or one of the AV suppliers. As you mentioned, Yoni, like sometimes there is a difference between a product and another, but like sometimes in certain works, we would accept. Like if a workshop is certified by one of those major suppliers, even if they are not our supplier, I would accept as UNHCR to use their service if I have no other solution. So my supplier cannot fly in, they do not have a certified workshop or partner at the location, then I would accept it based on like case-by-case scenario, depending on what is available.
I think there's some great opportunities for like-mindeds to be able to work together. And again, whether you're repairing and servicing and schedule servicing, for example, from manufacturer A, B or C, the concepts are there, and trying to promote that more collegiate approach across whether it's UN agencies or even diplomatic missions. Going back, the chaps from, shame the State Department aren't here, when I was in Kabul, and I was talking with the British Embassy there, and we had the same problems, and so we knocked on the door of the American Embassy. We had a wonderful meeting with Julie Cabus at the time, was the RSO, to say, well, what can we do? We've got the same type of vehicles, same mission scenarios, same problems. Could we not work together in order to develop a workshop process that can suit all our vehicles? And that was something that we tried to do, a bit more difficult with the American government, but I did it certainly in Islamabad and in Kabul with the British government. So, Yoni, maybe some stories from the field or some thoughts that you had as to that authorization.
Going back to what you said, I think on the locations with the big fleets, like Afghanistan, Somalia, you will find a better, because there's so many vehicles, so even for a workshop, it's worthwhile to invest. I mean, but the problem starts in the location with, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 vehicles per country office. That's difficult. 2 months ago, I was in Addis Ababa for one of the diplomatic corps. They don't want to bring their Toyota to Toyota dealership there because they assume, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's correct. I have no idea. I didn't check. That the government took over all of the private workshops and other assets, and they're afraid that once they will bring the vehicle there, right away they will be tracked. I mean, they will put some, so they don't want to put their vehicles into this well-established Toyota dealership in Addis Ababa. I asked him what the other missions diplomatic corps do. they do bring it into the, so it's a policy from their headquarters in their capital city. They do have a small potential workshop in their embassy, but you really need to invest to make it proper one, and we're talking about 3 armored vehicles. So that's what I'm saying. If it was Afghanistan or Somalia, they will probably have more than a dozen. Over there, they have 2 or 3, so it is a challenge.
And you, through the work that you've been doing, we have, as you've both been saying, at some point you just have to deal with the local workshop. That's just the reality. Now, you therefore have to make the best out of it rather than complain, oh gosh, they're no good. You know, what are some of the systems? Maybe there's some processes, multi-stage processes of working, advising a workshop to develop personnel, equipment and processes. So do you want to maybe speak to that for a couple of minutes?
I think that's a whole scope for a long session, and we're at the end of the day.
Give us the Soldiers 5, as we would call it.
I think, again, the workshop need to be instructed and trained by the manufacturer, by the up-armoring company. And if it deals with 20 different vehicles from 19 different manufacturers, it still needs to have 19 different instructions. Again, if there's no choice, and as Imad said, I mean, if it's a decent workshop that did a good job with this customer, with this up-armoring, you can be more calm that it will take care of another vehicle made by another manufacturer, but you still want it to be trained, because in one, again, not in intent, they can do something that your 150,000 euro, give or take, vehicle is not fit for purpose anymore, and it's brand new only because it put something wrong on the right, material A on vehicle B or something like that. Right. They need to be trained.
Indeed, indeed. All right, so look, we're going to start to wrap up, and we also have a guest participant who will call upon. Just give us another couple of minutes, or actually you can come up here for a moment. Come
yeah, we're talking about the country offices. So Abu George, he's the, whoever doesn't know, he's the fleet manager of the British consulate.
All right, so we might do that. So come on, sit down. Okay. All right, so.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you, Rob and Yoni, for allowing me for this session. My name is Afram Zambil, and I work for the British consulate in Jerusalem. In our post, we have 8 armored vehicles of different types, LC200, LC300, different ages. And from my real experience, you know, I've been working with for the UK for more than 10 years, but before that, my experience was with the United Nations. I worked with them for many, many years, and I was the project manager for installing around 1,543 fleet logs all over the 5 countries, which was in Jerusalem, West Bank, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. So I have good experience about that. What I want to say here about the armored vehicles is that we see that, for example, our HQ management, they have 186 posts to look at. In that aspect, I can see and tell that there is too much that has to be done from my side. I will be the indicators, but I will not go to my HQ management with the problem. So I will be in touch with the manufacturer about the defects that might come, look at it, look at the small defects, find the solution. Then I go to my HQ management in London, explain to them what's going on to give me the authority to go ahead for the repair. In regard to workshops, we are lucky in Jerusalem to have certified workshops, for example, for Toyotas. But actually, we look at their references. We tell them, please tell us, what else do you do for other missions? Do you work with whom? They say we work for the Americans, we work for the Swedish, we work for the Belgians. So each each mission has a certain number of armored vehicles. From that aspect, we look at the reviews and then we get indulged with them. We make a market research every while because we do have more than one garage dealers, certified garage dealers. So we see that in terms of real life for armored vehicles, civilian armored vehicles, the first indicators are the drivers. The drivers, they have to report the problem with the vehicle, no matter how tiny the problem, no matter what if it is a weird sound, if it is something that they say they are filling the car with water and then they reach a destination and they find the water is less, we have to take action. And the thing for us then comes to me how to take that action and repair the vehicle, because we do have the capability of doing it. In regard to spare parts, the first thing is that you should know, as a fleet manager dealing with armored vehicles, not any single company has the spare parts of that civilian armored vehicles, because each manufacturer has his unique spare parts in terms of brakes, pads, in terms of brake discs, in terms of shock absorbers, and all these things. The other things, small things like, for example, oil filter, AC, these are done by the manufacturer. These, you should stock them. Otherwise, your AVs will get stuck. And then you will remain on Mondays. What is Mondays? Mondays is the first of the week. So if you're stuck on Mondays and you come the next day and you don't find a solution, you're still Monday. You haven't moved to Tuesday. So in order to action your week, you have to take action, real action, and solve the problem. So the indicators is drivers, fleet manager, manufacturer, in case of a defect or something that is weird, that is not scheduled for preventive maintenance, something that you see that you haven't seen before, don't play smart and say, we can handle it locally. No, don't handle it locally. Go to the manufacturer. We have technology today. We have the WhatsApp. So go on WhatsApp, tell them exactly what's the main problem. They will tell you what to do. You go to your HQ services, and then after that, you take the right action. This is, thank you for letting me talk about it.
That's all right. Excellent, well done. All right. We'll take any questions from the floor to any of the chaps here that you might have. They're going to be around anyway, so you can grab them over a beer and pizza night. Yes, go ahead here. Grab this.
Hi, thank you. Very interesting presentation. Actually, I know very well UNHCR fleet management system. I'm from WHO, and it was an example for us when we started to do our global fleet management system. But one thing I think which is really necessary is the budget, allocating proper budget, because the experience with WHO, for example, I was able to show them, okay, now we have a fleet management system, we have data, we know how many kilometers vehicles are doing, it costs that much per kilometer, so your budget in a year is that much. But look, before, when it was not well managed, it was costing that much because there was overconsumption of fuel, etc., etc. So when the budgets are allocated, after there is no issue. Otherwise, yes, they will go to the cheapest workshop. I've seen people putting tires, standard tires on AVs, and after 1 kilometer, the tires blow. So for me, it's a budget which is very important.
Indeed. And, I think it's interesting, the cost per kilometre is an interesting guide, and it's also ensuring that the budget is actually allocated for the fleet. There was one particular diplomatic mission I visited when I was with Canberra, and there was a problem with the fleet, and the driver said, we've got no money. So what do you mean? We give you X thousands of dollars per year. Yes, well, the ambassador didn't like, they had a problem with the bathroom, so we had to use the money to fix the bathroom. And that means you've got no money for new tyres. And the driver said, that's exactly right. So, this is a challenge between whether it's a headquarters or it's the ambassador or the manufacturers. It's a great challenge.
Actually, I wanted to thank the colleague to highlight that point about the budget. It's a very important point like that when I mentioned the training of drivers and all of that, if we encourage them to report, if we don't close that loop at the end and we do an action and we repair the vehicles, then it doesn't lead to a successful fleet management system. Of course, definitely the budget is a main thing. But if we manage to have a preventive measure in place and we plan ahead for those measures or the repair and maintenance and all of that, the cost will be very small compared if we keep the problem to escalate. So even managers, when I mentioned the buy-in from managers, setting the expectations and all of that, also they need to assign resources. Again, it's very challenging, especially these days. I didn't want to touch on that because everyone knows the situation in the whole world, and especially with the UN with the budget constraints these days. But still, whatever we invest now will be much less than what we will have to pay later if we don't address the problems on time. Again, managers are not a very easy position. They might accept and they budget something for the maintenance and repair at a certain stage in the year. They would be asked to reduce their budget by 20%, and then they have to grow across the board and cut from everywhere. This would include the budget assigned for the repair of fleet, including AVs. So again, the challenge, the financial challenge, is not easy to address. So thanks for highlighting that. It is there. Unfortunately, maybe we cannot do a lot to address it immediately, but at least we could always advocate that whatever you spend now will be much less than what you need later. Thanks.
I think the point you're making is very valid in adapting to changing environments. And so what you were doing yesterday, which was maybe a structured system, may not be applicable today because of a change in the environment that you're working in. And I suppose this is where the lessons learned, coming back to my presentation. If you've got the data and you understand how the vehicles are performing, then you can actually make an informed decision that says, rather than every 6 months going to a scheduled service, I can push out to maybe 9 months, or whatever the case may be. But you can make that based on data and analytics, rather than just supposition and guessing, if you like, along the way. And that's, again, what it is. Any other thoughts? Yes, indeed, here.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. Leonard from TSS International. Have you ever thought about the option of purchasing or using mobile workshops?
As I mentioned, the first option for us is using in the absence of local workshop that has the capacity and the infrastructure, is we go to the partner company or the supplier, which they provide actually, which is as a mobile unit or after sales service unit that they send to us. So we use that service. But if the question is about using a third party, which is not the supplier, this option was discussed on many occasions, and it proved to be a little bit complicated because for the examples that were mentioned, it's difficult to find a mobile unit. Maybe it exists, and I'm personally not aware of, that they are capable to address mechanical or any repair types for AVs, whoever is the manufacturer. Yeah, so this was discussed in the past. We don't use it now. We don't have a contract with a mobile service that is a third party, different from the supplier, if I understood correctly your question. But the unit that they send in the field, it is a mobile unit that they send it everywhere they need to support their clients. So from one side, we use this type of service, but not like an independent mobile service that is not connected to the main supplier of the AV. Do you need the microphone again?
No, I think.
Yes, mobile workshop, yeah.
Look, the concept, fly in, fly out technicians is nothing new. There's a number of different organisations that do it.
But if you are interested, TGS, they develop, Toyota Gibraltar, they develop a nice mobile workshop. We initiated the project, now it's in their catalog. And we train mechanic and assistant mechanic driver. And we divided Nigeria in 3 different zones, a 3 mobile workshop. So it was not the car going to the workshop, it was the mobile workshop coming to the cars.
All right. Look, we might wrap it up there, given it's sort of the end of a very long day. I want to, Imad, thank you, and Yoni, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Fleet management is just one of those wonderful challenges that we all face in one aspect or another with regard to the civilian armoured vehicles. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much.